1 minute, 1 minute. Oh, really? Ready for you when you get home. I hear you.
Ray.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to Albany City Council meeting, July 24th, 2024 at 6 p.m. I now call the meeting to order. Will you please all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Allison, would you please do a roll call?
Counselor Novak.
Here.
Counselor Newton Azor.
Present.
Counselor Kopczynski.
Here.
Counselor Montague.
Here.
Counselor Smith. Here. Counselor McGee.
Present.
Mayor Johnson II.
Here. Thank you very much for that. Next on today's agenda is special presentations. At the request of the presenters, I'm going to switch the role from 2 to 1 and 1 to 2. So first up, we Festival Latino, Ana Ole Ojeda Duffy. It's going to be a presentation, verbal presentation.
Good evening, all. Thank you, Mayor Johnson, for inviting me today and the council members. My name is Ana Ojeda Duffy, and I am here on behalf of the Hispanic Advisory Committee. I'm co-chair for Lynn County, and just would like to formally welcome you all to our Festival Latino, which will be held on September 8th this year at Timberland Park, and give you a little bit of history about Festival Latino and how it came to be. So the first Festival Latino started in 1997 at the Shopco parking lot. We're not really positive about the name that they used back then, but it was started by a case manager with the Department of Health and Humans, or Department of Health, the DHS, sorry. I'm a little nervous first time up here. So the event, annual event alternated between Corvallis and Albany, switching back and forth, until finally we settled on Monteith Park, where we've had it the last few years, up until COVID. And so we had that hard stop, and we've finally been able to resume. Weren't able to get to Monteith due to the construction, but are so happy with Timberland. I've done a couple of site visits out there, and I think it's going to be a great festival. So I hope that you all have this on your agenda to come out and enjoy the festivities with us. We have secured 3 gold sponsors. We have Lynn County Health Services, LBCC, Next Home Realty Connection, and we also have silver and bronze sponsors, CW Ride Cascades West Council of Governments, private citizen Nancy Greenman. NAACP is also sponsoring us, as well as Albany Parade. So we're really excited to have a lot of sponsors and support throughout the community. We have 15 community resource vendors that are also going to be joining us, providing resources for the community, not just the Latino community, but for the community in general. The Latino community is part of Albany, as you all know, so we want to just make sure that everybody feels welcome, everybody's invited, and we want to share our culture with the community at large. We have also 3 dance troupes, a DJ and a Zumba instructor that's going to be doing some entertainment between sessions of the groups changing, the dance groups or the musical groups changing. So I was elected as the co-chair back in September, and one of my goals with Festival Latino and accepting the role as a co-chair was to strengthen the partnership with the HAC and the city of Albany, and I'd really like to resume that partnership and just make this a tourist event for years to come, similar to the Blues Festival in Portland, or we have the Oregon State Fair. Let Albany's Festival Latino be known as a regional event, and that it's something that we can all look forward to on an annual basis. Like, oh yeah, September, you know. And the reason we have it in September is September 16th is Mexico's National Independence Day. It's not Cinco de Mayo, it's September 16th. And so all of our celebration is really centered around September 16th. Thank you all for your time. Is there any questions?
Council?
I just wish I could be there because I'll be at the carousel during that time frame.
We wish you could be there too.
I've attended previous Festival Latinos, and I've always had a wonderful time, especially love the folklorico dancing. I believe
Yes.
the last one before the pandemic. So I'm excited. I have it on my calendar.
Yeah, great.
Thanks for the
Thank you.
invitation.
Well, you all have the flyers. I do have extra flyers back here. I'm so sorry.
So I was invited, and I'm bringing my wife with me, and hopefully my grandkids will come as well. But I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to be here too. Good night.
Thank you. Next on tonight's agenda is Oregon Cascades West Council of Governments Annual Report. Ryan Volk, the Executive Director. Okay. I have a timer. Or you have 10 minutes.
Well, good evening, councilors, city staff, and mayor. Thank you so much for having me back again. My name is Ryan Vogt. For the record, I'm the executive director for Oregon Cascades West Council of Governments, and it's always a joy to come and have a little bit of a conversation about the exciting work that our organization does. One of our board members likes to refer to us as a friendly octopus because we have our fingers in so many different things. And so it's always hard for me to kind of calibrate where I'm gonna hit the mark. So what we'll do today is try to not hit any mark. That will be the best way to do it. So in your packet is a little bit of a snapshot of our annual report. It is now late July, so the information's a little bit stale, but it gives you a flavor if you're not familiar or if the last time you thought about the Cascades West Council of Governments was the last time I was here, as a refresher about some of the different things that we have our fingers into. With me is Director of Senior Disability Services, Randy Moore. I'm going to turn it over to her in just a moment so she can talk about, really, she's responsible for about 3/4 of the work that we do. A lot of it focused on seniors and the social aspects of the work that we do. And so I'm going to let her brag a little bit about the fantastic stuff that she and her staff are doing. But there was 2 quick things that didn't make the report because they're much closer to hot off the press that I wanted to share with you. The first is, the last time I was here, I talked to you about my vision for the organization about bringing on grant writing support for our member agencies. It's a fledgling idea. It's still taking some time to unfold, but we finally got our first grant writer into the organization. She's come in with quite a bit of excitement, and she's only been here 2 months, but she's already written 2 large-scale grants for Safe Streets for All. This brings in a ton of money, potentially, for our region. Now, as a single entity, we weren't allowed to be the submitting agency for both grants. We wrote them, but we couldn't submit them both. So we are actually sponsoring a grant all up and down 101 for Lincoln County. And then the city of Tangent took over the ownership of being the sponsor for the Lynn County and part of Benton County grant to get us a lot of planning money to help make sure that we could reduce fatalities is really our focus. All indicators are most of those grants are being awarded, so we're very excited about that possibility, fingers crossed. And if we get that money, that will be planning grants for us to be able to prioritize either some of your projects that didn't escalate up into ODOT's funding scales for us to try to find new money for, or other areas where we can find safer crossings or lights or what have you. The other thing that I wanted to share with you, and this is super hot off the press, is we have a sister agency, Community Services Consortium. I think you're all probably familiar with Peggy McGuire and the incredible work that they do. And we've been partnering very closely with them for a number of years. There's been a conversation for depending on the legend and lore, perhaps as long as 20 years, about the possibility of us working even more closely together. As of several weeks ago, both boards for Community Services Consortium and for the Council of Governments voted to move forward with hiring a single executive director over both agencies. Now, that's all the further it's going, and that's all the further in terms of news that I have to share. So process, how that's going to unfold, when that's going to happen, all of that stuff has not been decided yet. But that is a kind of a landmark, I think, endorsement of the notion that the two agencies work very well together, and the possibility of administrative streamlining continues to exist, and that there is belief by both boards that the structures are currently in place to really continue to serve this region better. And so I'll be happy to provide updates as that goes along. Mayor Johnson sits on our board at the Council of Governments and probably can give you information as well as that goes. But that's super hot off the press, so I thought I'd share that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Randy.
Hi, everyone. As Ryan introduced me, I'm Randy Moore. I'm the Director of the Senior and Disability Services Program. We're an area agency on aging that serves older adults and people with disabilities for Linn and Benton counties. We do Older Americans Act programs as well as Medicaid programs. That's a little different than some other area agencies on aging. But bottom line, that means if you have an older adult, a person with a disability, or a family caregiver of one of those individuals, we're the place that you want to reach out to help support. So I did want to provide a little bit of updated information about just a couple of numbers that are going on in our programs. If you don't know, we're the Meals on Wheels provider for our 3-county area. I did want to let you know that already, through July through June of this last year, our Meals on Wheels program delivered over 75,000 meals in the Albany, out of our Albany meal site and into the Albany area. So that's a lot of food that we provided to older adults and people with disabilities in your communities. And we're so appreciative of our place at the Riverfront Community Center and how we are able to work there. Biggest news that's happening right now is congregate dining, which is a sort of a restaurant-style dining that older adults can come for. Has been closed since COVID came along, but we actually are hoping to reopen and reinvigorate our congregate dining program at the community center. It's going to be called Connections Cafe, and I would love to come once we're getting that fully launched and share that information with you in the near future. The other thing I wanted to let you know, we do also do adult protective services. So that's investigations of elder abuse or abuse of other vulnerable populations like people with disabilities for our area. And in Albany, I did have some more recent numbers, and these are APS numbers from January through June. We actually received 266 calls of concerns of abuse or neglect in the Albany community. And out of that, it resulted in 153 facility calls that were investigated and 266 community calls. So I just wanted to let you know that our Adult Protective Services team is out definitely working to try to keep people safe in your community. If you ever have a concern about someone who's in your community, our Aging and Disability Resource Connection is our call center, and they can provide resources and supports for our programs as well as other community programs that we partner with and use as resources for people who reach out to us and need services. Very quickly, I'm not going to tell you about the program because we sent around a brochure. We have a Stand By Me financial empowerment program that is open to all people in all ages who are looking for some financial coaching. It's a coaching model, so this is free financial coaching, not just a one-time visit, but you get to establish a relationship with a volunteer coach who's going to help you meet your goals. And we've really helped people increase their savings, reduce their debt, and increase their credit score. And so we've had people who've paid off student loans. We've had people who made real progress in getting a house down payment. And so we offer that coaching in Spanish and in English. So please look at those brochures. And if you know anyone who you could share that information with, that'd be great. One final thing, Behavioral activation is a program that we're offering to older adults. It's to reduce depression. It's a free program. Our next session is starting in September. People who participate through the whole 6-week, I think it is, program actually receive a incentive, a cash, like a gift card incentive. It's a virtual thing, and we can help provide technology to older adults who want to participate. It's focused mostly on veterans, but anyone who's an older adult who's really experiencing some isolation or depression can be part. So I'm going to leave this with Allison as well, and I hope that you'll look at it and think about spreading the word. We weren't able to have the most recent class because we didn't have enough participants. We'd really like to make sure that this is a resource in our community. And that's it for me, unless you have questions.
So first and foremost, thank you both for being here, and I'm excited about what we're doing with the committee. But Randy, I have your ARDC cards and all your brochures, but I'd love to have a stack of these for my office, and also that flyer so I can make sure my clients have it, because I have a lot of clients that are single and/or away from their children, and they're depressed, and that's the way it is. And so I'd like to help them as much as I can, so.
You know, I'll bring you brochures anytime you ask.
Thank you, I
so
appreciate that.
Happy to do that.
And it's because, with AEP coming up in October, I'll be seeing a lot of folks, and I'd love to get that information in their hands. Go ahead, Jack, Councilor Montague.
I do, first, that's amazing how many meals you guys have distributed. That is just so crazy. I was just kind of curious, because I know one of the volunteers, but how many volunteers is distributing that many meals?
Oh, well, I know that our total meals for volunteers across the 3-county region is about 360.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, I will say that Albany is our fastest growing site, and we're developing more routes all the time because of the increased number of consumers. So if you know anyone who's interested in volunteerism, we would always support that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much.
Any other councilors have anything?
I just wanted to say, if you can get that information, I would like to bring that to the school. I'm not sure if LBCC has that, but these things are the source of information that we would need to run our adult education program and our continuing education program.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you so much for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is business from the public. Allison, do we have anyone? So to establish, so people know what's going on with this, business from the public is your opportunity to speak with council. It's not a back and forth time. Business from the councils will respond during business from the council, excuse me. So business from the public is just a one-way conversation. Business from the council is us going out. So if you want to hear the responses or address your issue, please stick around for business from the council. With that, the first name on the list, there's nobody virtually signed up? Okay. Is Allison Dean? And don't state your address. As long as we know that you live in Albany, we're good to go.
My blood type is A positive. Just kidding. Hi, my name is Allison Dean. I live in Ward 1.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. I serve on the Human Relations Commission, but I'm here to speak today as a concerned resident and taxpayer. I want to address the action, or maybe we should say inaction, around the July 4th concert at Monteith River Park. As many of you know, during this concert, Lee Greenwood, who was the performer, said the only thing we hope for is that we can stop illegal immigration because the people that are coming through to kill you. This incident is an incredible injury to our community. This statement is a blatant lie and overgeneralization intended to stoke fear and division. In discussion with Mid-Valley Media or Democrat Herald, our city attorney, Sean Kidd, stated that Greenwood's contract language contained a clause that noted it was a family-oriented event, and it was advertised as such. How is a statement like this in line with the advertisement that this event would be family-friendly? What does it do to children who hear this, believing that someone immigrating into the country could kill them? What does this kind of stereotype teach families? And how can the city stand behind something like this? To me, this does sound like a breach of contract. Sure, the artist doesn't represent the views of the city, but the artist got our money to the tune of $70,000, approximately $25,000 to $55,000 more than what's typical according to the figure that Parks and Rec Director Kim Ledane provided to the Democrat Herald. I'm shocked that you, as the mayor, that you were extremely concerned about this performer and you weren't able to intervene with guidance about this booking. So it brings this question for me, is it that you don't know about the performer before the booking is done? And if that's the case, how might we change this so we don't have another extremely concerning artist step onto our community stage? Last year, during a Human Relations Commission meeting, we discussed how to engage a large but marginalized population in our community, the Latine community, in large-scale events planning. The Hispanic Advisory Council, Ana was here today talking about the Hispanic Advisory Council's work to produce Festival Latino, and I know that they've been trying to engage the city in supporting it. It was brought up last July in an HRC meeting, and during that meeting, we had suggested that Parks and Recreation consider having an advisory board representing various communities within our city to ensure that there was representation in the decision-making process for what really should be a city celebration, right? This sadly was an opportunity that went unrealized. Now the city has another opportunity to learn from this, to reach out to its community for representation. We have citizen advisor groups for a reason, to engage the voices of the citizens of Albany. I hope that in future years of this concert series, we will see a more committed effort to solicit community voices in the decision-making process. And if the booking agency with whom the department works for this series doesn't offer a variety of artists that appeal to various communities, it's time to find a different agency. Our communities here are our greatest strength. Engage them, engage us. I look forward to the mayor's public statement about this and hope it will be shared in a publicly accessible way beyond the firewall of a media subscription, because it does limit how people are able to actually see some of this. Unfortunately, a lot of people were unaware of the nuances of this particular event because the only way they were able to access that was behind a media firewall. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, next up is Robert Springer. State your ward and your topic. You have 3 minutes after you do that.
Robert Springer, Ward 3. This applies to the city. I'm one of 4 houses that's directly across the street from the Meadows Apartments and down the street from the Park Apartments. And I've sent all of you emails regarding the problem of smokers who are smoking on the sidewalks, walking around smoking, crossing the street smoking, walking down the periwinkle path smoking. And it's not just tobacco they're smoking. This cigarette smoke and other smoke is invading our houses. There is no way to block it. I've researched it. I've looked for solutions. I've talked with the Meadows management. They walk around, they drive and smoke on our side of the street, across the street. Cigarette butts are all over the sidewalk. We're asking the city to do something. I've talked with Chris Schendel, who's an amazing employee that you should value. He said that there are cities who have said there is no smoking on public streets and downtowns. So the city has the wherewithal to say, you can't smoke in public. You can't have your cigarette smoke going into people's homes, their yards. I feel like I am being assaulted and can't enjoy my home or my yard. I got a reply from Marilyn Smith that the city has no means to enforce it. We're not asking for enforcement. We're asking for clarification to tell these people, you cannot put your smoke into people's homes and their yards. When they call the police say, yes, you can smoke on the sidewalks. They're not discerning. You can't walk around. You can't be right behind somebody's property. If the city says you cannot smoke on public sidewalks, you cannot put smoke into people's homes, then the city does not need to enforce it. I have a means to say you are breaking the law, you are invading my property, and I have a means to sue you for what you're doing to my home. When the police get a phone call and say, yeah, you can smoke out there, I have very little that I can say to them my power's been taken away to protect my home and our neighbors protect their homes. I need to know what vehicles there are, whether it be work sessions to meet with folks like you, talk to the city, but something has to be done. This is horrendous, and the city is responsible to protect our health and our welfare, and that's not happening in this situation.
Thank you.
So you have my emails. I look forward to hearing from you with questions, what we can do to work together to resolve this, not to be a burden on the police. I'm here to work together.
Thank you, sir. Next tonight is Raj Johal. Is that, say that correctly? Ward and topic.
Afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Appreciate your time. I'm here to talk about the opening of a cannabis store, if possible.
What ward do you live in? Do you live in the city of Albany?
Yes, we live in the city of Albany.
Which ward?
We live by the Walmart. I'm not sure which ward.
Ward
that
3.
is. Yeah, Ward 3.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my family and I have been part of the city of Albany since 2007. We run the U.S. market there on Waverly and 21st. It's in the same plaza as the Game Time Sports Bar. For some time now, we've been hoping to expand. And in that same plaza, the unit next to us has been empty since we've opened in 2007. And we've been informed that the zone restriction against the cannabis store is there. And we do understand that the city of Albany is very strict on this matter. But we were just hoping to touch base with anyone, if possible at all, and what steps we can take the right way to get the zone lifted, the restriction on the zone lifted. That's all, my people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on tonight's agenda is Sarah Whiteside.
Good evening, Sarah Whiteside, and Albany Ward 1, resident of 24 years. And I'm here tonight as a concerned constituent and an advocate for the values of diversity and inclusivity that our city seeks to uphold. I am here to address a matter that has deeply affected many of us, the recent performance by Lee Greenwood during our beloved River Rhythms concert series. This concert series, funded by taxpayer dollars, is a cherished tradition meant to bring our communities together, celebrate our shared values, and provide family-friendly entertainment. However, this year, the choice of performer not only fell short of these ideals, but actively undermined them. Mr. Greenwood used his platform to spread hate speech against undocumented immigrants, labeling them as murderers in front of an audience that included children. The falsehoods espoused on that stage on the opening night of our beautiful Monteith Park's long-awaited reopening are vile and dangerous. This is not the message that we want to send, nor the environment that we want to foster. Our city prides itself on being a welcoming, inclusive, and diverse community. We celebrate our differences and understand that they make us stronger. It is imperative that our public events reflect these values. Therefore, I propose the establishment of a representative body comprised of diverse voices and perspectives to review and approve the lineup of performers for River Rhythms and Summer Sounds. This body should include members from various demographics, identities, and backgrounds to ensure that the artists we invite to perform represent and respect all of our community's values. By involving a wider array of voices in the decision-making process, we ensure that our events are inclusive, respectful, and enriching for all attendees. This step will not only safeguard the integrity of our public spaces, but also send a clear message that our city stands against hate, disinformation, and division. In closing, I urge you to consider this proposal seriously. Let us work together to create a concert series that every member of our community can enjoy and be proud of, one that truly reflects the rich tapestry of our city. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Can you read this? Next is Vienna and Carol Davies. Together, both of you individually speaking.
It's even worse. It's long, auger,
Okay,
but no O's.
I have it in my phone, I'll give it to you.
I'm Vienna Long Auger, and I just learned I'm in Ward 1. I'm here to follow up from Monday night's meeting about the camping situation and the codes changing. My boss asked me to share a story. My concern is for people that fall through the cracks. I was one of those for many years, and a couple of weeks ago, during outreach, I met a man at Walmart. The man had just been released from jail, very obviously with some serious mental health challenges, and was camping out there. This man's symptoms are so bad, he would not drink water. He was petrified of water. I was somewhere Monday, and I happened to look down, and this man had told us that his mother was probably dead, and he didn't know how to get to his house. I was somewhere Monday, and I looked down, and there's a missing poster. It was my guy. I've been able to connect with Mom. He's no longer camping, but Mom is in a situation where she doesn't know what to do. He's a grown man. He's older. He's probably around my age. Mental health is no help for him. He gets arrested, put in jail. Jail kicks him out, and he's supposed to find his way to Sweet Home. And he camps. Where is this man gonna go? He is not shelter eligible. He's falling through the cracks. Now, we as an agency are supporting Mom with exploring guardianship and things, but he's not the only one. And my concern, because of my own history with mental health, homelessness, and substance use, that's my concern is folks like that. And I really hope that the council members will consider our folks like that. Sending this man to a shelter where he has to go to religious practices is not feasible. It is not. Continuing to put him in jail because there was a shelter available that he cannot get into, and even if he could not. He literally cannot stay there. And so I wanted to just share that because there's so many folks like that, and that's where my heart is for outreach. And, you know, I got a call from parole and probation 2 weeks ago, a man let out of prison. 106 degrees, black sweatshirt, black pants, work boots, no medications, no housing plan, no nothing, not shelter eligible. Parole and probation called me and said, can you get him a sleeping bag or something? So now am I gonna be liable for helping this man break the law because he's out camping? Fortunately, we did get him placed, but it took a couple of days. And is he gonna look at going back to prison, because he's violated the law his first 24 hours out because he's not shelter eligible? And I just would like to encourage the council to consider there are people that fall through the cracks, that there literally is nowhere to go for them. When I've got an 80-year-old woman calling mental health and begging them for help with her son who is begging her to chop off his feet.
Thank you.
We need
3
help.
minutes is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Carol Davies. You have 3 minutes.
I'm Carol Davies, and I'm a resident of Ward 1. I'm also the Outreach Program Director for COAT, which is part of Creating Housing Coalition. And I also wanted to speak on the issue of what's going on in the ordinances that are proposed. I realize that Marvin's Garden is not pretty to look at. There are a lot of problems. I think that probably a lot of those problems could be rectified if there were an organization that were in charge rather than just having the police show up continually. That being said, I will piggyback onto what Vienna said. A lot of the people, I would say most of the people who are at Marvin's Garden right now are there because they are ineligible to go anywhere else. They've got a lot of mental health problems. They've got substance use problems. But what's happening is organizations like COAT, we're going out there and we're talking to people. We're building relationships with them, garnering trust. and we're getting these people the help that they need. We just recently got a couple who were very enmeshed in substance addiction, and the woman was about to have a baby. They had the baby, and the couple is now in rehab. That's because of the work that COAT does. This is what can happen when organizations come together and help the people who are on the street and who are the most vulnerable. For us to be imposing fines, people have no income, it becomes a revolving door. What happens to them is they go to jail, they come out, they're supposed to pay a fine, they have no way to pay that fine. So they end up back in jail, or they end up having to steal something or sell drugs or do whatever they need in order to get the money. So I really don't think that that's a viable solution to impose fines on people who have no income and who are the most vulnerable. So I just wanted you to give this a little bit of thought and just think about maybe having another organization coming in and taking control of Marvin's Garden and having organizations like COAT continue to help those people who need the help the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Again, the council will be responding as they wish during business from the council, so if you plan to hang around and be here for that, the council will respond. Thank you. Teachers too. Next on tonight's agenda is first reading of ordinances. Now, City Attorney, do we do them one at a time or do we do them as a group? One at a time? Okay. A is camping shelter ordinances, Christiandale, page 5 through 27 of the packet. And
Chris,
so,
did you?
Chris has just come up in case you have questions, and I understood from Counselor Novak that she might have some questions.
okay. So would the city attorney please read the ordinance in title only?
An ordinance amending Albany Municipal Code, AMC, Chapter 7.20, camping regulations.
Would the council like to make a motion to read the ordinance the second time in title only?
I would move to read the ordinance a second time in title only.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
Motion fails. Next on tonight's agenda is,
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
just let me remind you that Counselor Novak had some questions to ask
When am
about.
I supposed to ask my questions if you're?
if you'd voted yes, we could have gone.
Okay, well, I guess I misunderstood.
That's okay.
I'm like,
And so, Counselor, we'll bring it back
We're gonna
at the
bring it back
next
anyway.
meeting on the
Okay,
14th, and
thank
then
you.
the second reading will
all right,
occur
because
then.
I don't want to approve a reading while I still have
Right.
questions.
No,
If
you'll
you
get a
read it a
chance.
second time, it's settled, right?
No,
So,
that's
no?
when we have discussion to vote on.
Fiddle-dee-dee. I'm sorry, I'm still tired, I guess.
Don't even worry about it.
Question,
No,
point of order.
We're going to we're next moving on.
I have a procedural question.
Go ahead.
So because we voted no on the second reading,
Mhm.
We have to bring it back.
it'll come back for a second reading, but that's not a chance to do any amendments, correct?
Correct. We're going to come back on the second, we'll come back on the second reading, and then we'll discuss it at that point, and then you'll vote on it or ask for it to come back with amendments.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next on tonight's agenda is add AMC .8.07, emergency transitional housing. Would the city attorney read the ordinance in title only?
An ordinance amending Albany Municipal Code, AMC, Title 8 by adding a new Chapter 8.06 titled Temporary Emergency Shelters.
Would the council like to make a motion to read the ordinance for the second time in title only?
Move to read the ordinance a second time in title only.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Is there we did
So
that?
I'll read it a second time. then.
Okay.
An ordinance amending Albany Municipal Code, AMC, Title 8 by adding a new Chapter 8.06 titled Temporary Emergency Shelters.
Move to adopt the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion and a favor. All those in favor say aye.
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 Would the city attorney please read the ordinance the second time in the title only?
We just
Or
did
that-
that. Was a move.
Is there any,
That- We just did that.
okay,
So
is there any discussion?
This is where I can ask questions,
Yes.
yes? Thank you. I do have some. Thank you. And I appreciate your patience with me since I missed discussion on Monday. So one of my questions, it says, number 9 on page 8, unless otherwise approved by the city manager or their designee with regard to kitchen units. I would like an example of what this is referring to. I'm just curious. I need clarification. There's a lot of things that I could use clarification on. Another thing, who's paying for all aspects of the emergency transitional situation? The water, the power, the construction? Is it the local government supposed to operate it? Is the local government supposed to fund it?
So, yeah, I have a procedural question again.
Yeah,
That- I think that's the one we just voted down, so I
No,
think
this-
we're
we're-
already
we're
moving.
past
to
that.
the
I think
next
she's
one.
talking about 807, emergency
Well, I'm
transitional
talking
housing.
about emergency housing.
Yeah, that's transition.
Emergency housing
Are
is,
you looking at?
that's the next one we're
Yeah,
we're
that's
getting
the
ready to do.
next
oh, I'm
That's
sorry.
the next
So which one are we on right now? My apologies.
So we just,
8.06.
we just voted on 8.06 and it was adopted, it passed.
Right.
So we should, yeah,
But
we're
does,
good to.
see, that was my question. So if we pass it, then when does the discussion come in? When is it appropriate to ask my questions? Normally, I probably wouldn't be so brain dead, but I guess I'm more jet lagged than I thought.
Counselor, you've got 4 different items.
You got four
Yes,
First
different
one,
thank
items
we
there.
voted to pass on to the next.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Next
The
one.
second one, we passed.
Okay, without discussion, without questions?
The question you have is
Right.
on for the next one. The
Question
one
you
you're
have is-
specifically talking about is
Yes.
for the
Okay,
next one.
and again, I do apologize
No
for needing
worries.
remedial help here today, but I
No
do.
worries.
So what we'll
Yeah.
do is, on the next one that we're getting ready to do, I'll read it the first time. There'll be a motion, maybe a motion to read it in title only and a second time. And then if that's seconded and everybody approves it unanimously, I'll read it a second time. Then at that point, that's when the council would discuss the ordinance before they vote on it, which would be the,
Thank you.
The next
That's
one.
what threw me too, because I'm
That's
like, why
okay.
are you
Yeah.
voting when I haven't asked my questions?
Right,
How can
right.
I vote on it if I'm not clear?
right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're on to 807, correct?
Yes.
That's where I have us. Add AMC 8.07, emergency transitional housing. Would the city attorney read the motion, the ordinance in title only?
An ordinance amending the Albany Municipal Code, AMC Title 8, by adding a new chapter 8.07 titled Emergency Transitional Housing.
Would councilor like to make a motion to read the ordinance for the second time in title only?
Move to read the ordinance a second time in title only.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Before we vote,
Well, so this is. so
would
now
the
I'll read
city
it a second.
attorney read it? Would the city attorney please read the ordinance the second time in title only?
An ordinance amending the Albany Municipal Code, AMC, Title 8, by adding a new chapter 8.07 titled Emergency Transitional Housing.
Now we discuss.
Okay, now I can ask some questions.
Yes.
And you said the question I asked previously actually applied to this.
Yes.
So again, funding question.
Yes.
Who's responsible for funding here?
So this is not a city-run thing. This is allowing organizations, churches, nonprofits to set up these units. That is on them to want to fund it. So this is a lot like, I don't know if you know about them, but like Unity Shelters in Corvallis, the micro shelters, this is what that kind of reflects. It does have some changes. The units could be bigger than those. And the kitchen unit, so for Corvallis and a lot of other places, when they allow 4 units, of the 4 units that are livable, if they want to put in a kitchen unit, that is one of those units. So our code, this proposed code, allows for 4 living units and a kitchen unit. So I hope that
With only an
answered both
induction stove, correct?
Yes, so
things
all of
can't
it's
burn down.
electrical.
All good.
Items. And then as we made this code, our focus was on safety while reducing the building standards to a point where the price point of building these wouldn't be astronomical. So the things that stayed in there that are of the bigger dollar items, such as a heater, AC, and like a wired-in smoke detector, were things that when I went to Unity Shelter or talked to groups around here, obviously AC and heating is one of the biggest things that we hear about for unhoused. But for the smoke detector side, the reason that that is an upcharge type item wired in is because what I heard from those groups was that a lot of them take them out of the unit and it becomes an issue. The wired in unit allows them some more warning, so they were requesting that be in there. Originally it wasn't, and then from those entities, they said, no, we'd like that. So we added that in.
Thank you. And then with regard to fees, because some of the information that I was reading, and it might have been on any 4 of these, it said that there wouldn't be any fee to people who were doing this for an emergency purpose. And then there was information that said the city council sets the fee, and I'm like, what fee for what? I'm
So-
not clear on that.
So the fee, the one that's no fee, that line item in there is set for the group who's putting on this emergency shelter to not charge the people who are staying there.
Got it.
The fee set by council, which is a building permit fee already set, is one for the reviewing of the plan to make sure it follows our guidelines and meets the minimum safety standard. So that one would be covered by the entities building these
Got it.
units to make sure that the building department's cost is met to fund it.
Thank you, Officer Schindel.
You're welcome.
Forgive me, may I ask a few more?
Of course.
Because I would rather ask and have clarity than not ask and have no idea. So, a number 8.06.015 with regard to the scope.
That's previous.
That, gosh darn it, I'm sorry.
I can
Okay.
still answer that if you
Well, go ahead and he'll
Yeah.
answer your question. Go ahead.
Okay, well, my question was, I had this written down, not to be used for any purpose other than as a temporary emergency shelter, except upon application for a permit demonstrating that the construction of the building and its use could be approved under current land use laws and local land use regulations. I need some clarification. I'm not understanding that.
So the difference between those two, one 806 and 807, the 806 was established as an ORS. And within that ORS, it says state and local governments shall adopt this ordinance. So that verbiage was taken straight from the ORS.
Okay.
Those units are built at a higher standard than the ones in 07, and they allow for a longer stay. So they do have more requirements. However, within the ORS, they talk about land use development and all that stuff so that there's all the roadblocks that would come to potentially make those not be able to be built get taken out. So that's a lot of what that verbiage is from, but that's stuff we can't change. We have to adopt that per the ORS. The verbiage, and that's part of section, if you look at the top where it says whereas, it goes through what ORS, and it's like a subsection 1, subsection A. It says that it requires the local government to adopt it as what it is.
Thank you. And then on 806.025, the city shall approve an application for use of land for temporary emergency shelter on any property, blah, blah, blah. And then number 3, that is located inside a UGB or in an area zoned for rural residential. Does that mean North Albany? Because I wanted clarification here. There were a lot of things done in North Albany that I did not know were coming to North Albany. And if something is zoned rural residential, is this saying that as long as it's in the urban growth boundary, they can put them up anywhere? Because I'm not clear on, it says you can't build a new building, but here it's saying it's zoned residential.
That one, because I'm not sure on all the zones, to be honest, I'd have to ask Matt Ruckers to
Well,
answer that one.
can anyone on staff clarify this?
Yeah. So Matthew, please.
And again, with the knowledge that we can't change that because it's an ORS.
Correct. So good evening, Mayor and Councilor. So the answer to your question, if it's one of the requirements is it located inside of urban growth boundary or in an area zoned for rural residential use as defined in ORS 215. the answer to that question is yes, it would be allowed for these temporary emergency shelters. Again, as Officer Schindel mentioned, this is a state code that we're required to adopt, and they're allowed in specific locations. So we didn't have a whole lot of say in what this code looks like.
Well, there's just things that don't make sense, because on one hand, I'm reading that you're not supposed to build a new structure. It's supposed to be in an existing structure, like you transform a hotel into an emergency something, so you're not making a new building. So then why do we have language in here that says, and anywhere in the urban growth boundary that's been zoned residential rural, like North Albany? How do you put people out there? It's supposed to be accessible to services as well, but you're not supposed to build a new building.
So to provide a little bit more clarity on this, it does, if you go down to 806.030, a temporary emergency shelter is only allowed and it must be operated by a local government, like the city, or under an organization that has at least 2 years experience in operating a temporary emergency shelter. And when you think of these types of organizations that would do that, that'd be a local housing authority, a religious corporation, so like a church. So this isn't designed for, if you had extra space on your property and you wanted to set up an emergency or a temporary emergency shelter, you wouldn't be allowed to do that. It can only be run by or managed by specific organizations. So a lot of times where you'll see these types of shelters set up are, say, in a church establishment, where they'll put them in.
That makes sense.
Like
That makes sense
A lot of
to me,
times you'll
but-
see them, Springfield and Eugene used a Conestoga hut style temporary shelter that were placed in parking lots of their facility for exactly these purposes. This isn't designed for an individual homeowner to make a decision that I want to set up a shelter in my backyard.
Right, not a homeowner, but this language says urban growth boundary zoned rural. So what's to stop a developer from saying, hey, this is in the UGB and it's zoned rural here. I'm gonna work with my friends in this wonderful organization that wants to help people, and we're gonna put something right here. I don't know, I just don't, that language, I take issue with the language. And I know that you're telling me it's an ORS and you didn't put the language in and you have no choice but to accept the language. It's just that I'm questioning the language based on prior experience with stuff that came down from the state that caught a whole lot of people in North Albany, myself included, very much off guard.
Correct. And when you're reading 06025 sub 3, where it talks about is located within an urban growth boundary, so that would be within the city's purview, or in an area zoned for rural residential use as defined in ORS. That rural residential use is going to be the county's zoning for rural residential. So that sets the general parameters as these are allowed in rural residential for a county or in the urban growth boundary of a city. And then it further goes on to say that the operation of these can only be done by a local government, so a city or a county.
What's to stop the city from coming to North Albany and plopping something down there because it's zoned rural residential? What's to stop the city from doing that?
That would be all of you.
That'd be us.
Okay, I hope that I won't be alone in that, because I am adamantly opposed to such a thing taking place. In North Albany in particular, which is obscenely built out, makes me almost late to every meeting, no matter how early I leave, just getting over the bridge through all the traffic. I don't know,
Matthew,
I'm
there's no
concerned.
there's no
Yeah.
urban fringe in North Albany, so it's not even applicable.
But it's rural, it's zoned rural residential. That was my issue.
That's a county zoning.
Correct.
Okay,
Well, in
so-
that it's inside of an urban growth boundary. So in North Albany, there is no urban fringe. It's all inside.
It's all inside.
To your concerns, Councilor Novak, that this is not, unless the city were to stand up a program, which we currently don't have funding for, to provide these types of emergency shelters, or there was a religious corporation or public benefit corporation, so like a 501A, that wanted to do these type of units, that it's not being done by your average citizen out there. So it's a very limited scope of the type of organizations that can use these types of facilities.
All right, I appreciate the reassurances and your patience with me.
No
As
problem.
I say, because I was so caught off guard with prior things that came down from the state, I am looking closely at everything now that could
Understandable.
even potentially affect my ward. So thank you. I'm going to see if I have anything else written down here. Oh, I didn't even have the number written down, but page 20 of 26, an application is not subject to approval if the point in time count of sheltered and unsheltered homeless.
That's I think it's the next one.
Is that the next one? Did I jump the gun? Or is it still on the same one? I think it's still this. On page 20 of 26, can anybody verify that I'm not jumping ahead? My question is, it doesn't make sense to me. It says, if it's less than 0.18% of the state population, then the application's not subject to approval. I don't understand what that means. Are you saying that if the population of homeless increases above 18%, then approval is required? This language does not make sense to me. An application, it's number 3, and forgive me, this is what I have written down.
Is it on page 20, is that, Counselor?
Page 20 of 26, yes.
It's actually page.
And it's number 3.
14 of the tonight's packet is what I believe
Okay,
Councilor
thank
Novak
you
is referring to.
for
yeah.
helping me there. On
No
my,
problem.
on my little iPad.
So that
That's
is
how it
in
shows up.
806, so the same section
Okay,
that
it
we were
is
just
good,
referring
then
to.
I'm on topic. Thank you. So can someone explain that to me? How is it that the application is not subject to approval if the point-in-time count of sheltered and unsheltered homeless is less than 0.18% of the state population?
That is a definition that the state has applied in the ORS. If I can attempt to kind of unpack what that means. If
I
you-
would appreciate it, because
if
I'd
you
like to
give me just a
understand what we're
second.
voting here for. I'd like to understand. And the language is
Yeah.
asinine.
So that's referring to, in those situations, we wouldn't have to approve an application.
Right, but that presumes that if it's more than 18%, now it's subject to approval?
As in addition to all of the other approval requirements noted in 806 above. So it's, again, you still have to meet all those requirements of the correct type of organization that is proposing to do this. And this is read as one big section, it's not taken individually.
Okay.
Those prior requirements are still in place.
Thank you, that helps. All right.
Any other discussion on point 8.07?
I might have one more, and I apologize, but.
Don't need to apologize, it's your time.
Okay, it's 807-025, thank you for that. Emergency transition housing units shall be allowed only on properties with approved non-residential land uses. That's the language, and my note was, well, it's 8.07.025. So non-residential land uses.
So going back to 807 now, the key to that one is that it has to be a religious group or a shelter thing. So we don't want it to open up access to somebody trying to do an ADU or something like that and then do it at a lower standard. So having that in there is what blocks that activity.
All right.
Even if a nonprofit were to buy a residential lot and then try to do that, this would say they can't.
Thank you for the clarification. All of them, thank you.
Any other councilors have discussion on 8.07? Would the councilor like to make a motion to adopt the ordinance?
I move to adopt the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Thank you. Next on tonight's agenda is item 4, add AMC 8.0108, conversions for emergency shelters or affordable housing. Page 26 of your packet. Will the city attorney read the ordinance in title only?
An ordinance amending Albany Municipal Code AMC Title 8 by adding a new chapter 8.08 titled Conversions for Emergency Shelters or Affordable Housing.
Will the councilor like to make a motion to read the ordinance for a second time in title only?
I would move to read the ordinance a second time in title only.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Would the city attorney please read the ordinance second time in title only?
An ordinance amending Albany Municipal Code, AMC, Title 8 by adding a new Chapter 8.08 titled Conversions for Emergency Shelters or Affordable Housing.
Councilors, are there any discussion on this topic?
Just
Councilor
general
Kropczynski?
comment about the whole process. Chris has done a yeoman's job trying to wade through state, and so does Matthew, wade through state and regulations that we're mandated to come up with. And he's trying to get our language in tune with all of that. And that's not an easy chore. And sometimes we're coming up with, I say he is coming up with compromises, because those have to be made in many cases. And people have choices. So some of the choices that they will be, in some cases, forced to make are not real good, but they do have to make choices. And if they're unable to do that, then we have to come up with some other means to try and help them. Coats is a perfect example of that trying to work. But some people will, in fact, yes, fall through the cracks. That is a guarantee. That's always been the case. And there's absolutely nothing we can do about some of these people, because they've made bad choices, and now they don't have the ability to go through the mental processes to get out of that hole. All we can do is try and offer some solutions. Compromises like Chris is coming up with, I think, are a good step. And, that's all I'm going to say on that.
Comment?
Councilor Smith?
To this ordinance in particular, I'm glad to see us adopting this particular state law. These projects have been done in other communities near and far in Oregon, and they are very successful generally. It's a good way to reuse underused property. It provides safe and sanitary shelter, and I just think it's a terrific use of underused property in solving a small part of this problem.
Councilor McGee?
Yeah, just one thing that Councilor Kropczynski said about people making bad choices. Sometimes we don't have to make a bad choice. Sometimes things just happen and they end up consequently in some situations. And I think we need to be very careful with our language in reference to our most vulnerable population when we're up here.
Councilor Newton-Azar?
I second Councilor McGee's comments.
Sir,
Thank you.
right here.
Oh, Councilor Novak.
I'd like to add that I believe both are true. Sometimes people are in a bad way due to no fault of their own. Other times they're in a bad way entirely due to choices they have made. Both are true. Neither is making a bad judgment on someone. It's just reality. It's just reality. Sometimes you didn't do anything. Sometimes you did.
Thank you. Council, would the council like to make a motion to adopt the ordinance?
Move to adopt the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Thank you, councilors. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Thank you. The ordinance has been adopted.
Confirming we're going to be coming back to the camping regulations. at a
That'll be
later
coming
date.
back to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Next on tonight's agenda is adoption of a consent calendar. Council?
I
Thank you,
move
gentlemen.
we adopt the consent calendar.
We have a motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you very much. Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Next, on to number 7 on tonight's agenda is a tax increment of staff reports, tax increment financing feasibility study. Economic Development Manager Sophie Adams, page 37 through 62 in your packet. She'll be joined by the Director of Community Development.
Good evening. This short presentation tonight is the final deliverable in this urban renewal feasibility study. It's mostly technical, so we have Nick Papanik from Tiberius Solutions here. He'll be taking the lead on describing the study and the results and answering your questions. As you'll remember from a previous meeting, the cost for the study was totally covered by grant funds. In Nick's presentation, you'll see that they evaluated the feasibility of an East Albany boundary, a South Albany boundary, and a combined boundary. Supporting business development in East and South Albany is described under Goal 1 of the Healthy Economy section of the city's current strategic plan. We worked with Tiberius as staff to draw these hypothetical areas based primarily on where there are pockets of or underdeveloped commercial and industrial properties, as well as areas with known infrastructure needs that have been barriers to recruiting job creators within that area. Actual boundaries would be tweaked during the plan creation phase that might happen sometime in the future. So Nick will go over at a very high level the process of creating a new district, just for your information, should that be something, again, you'd like to pursue in the future. As I stated in my memo, there's no action recommended or requested tonight. So I'll turn that over to Nick so he can introduce himself again, and he'll share his screen with the results of the study.
Okay, thank you, Sophie, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me there virtually this evening. Can everyone see the PowerPoint on the screen?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, terrific. I'm going to try and move through the presentation fairly quickly and make sure we save time for you all to ask questions or have discussion on the topic. I know that urban renewal is not new to the city of Albany, and you all have years of experience implementing an existing urban renewal area that is much closer to the end of its duration than it is to the beginning. So we're not taking a deep dive into the mechanics of how urban renewal works, but in case there are folks in the audience that are less familiar with this tool, we wanted to make sure that we did provide a brief background here. So urban renewal is an economic and redevelopment financing tool. It is an implementation tool that provides funding to fund the various projects and plans that cities adopt over time that might otherwise just sit on a shelf due to a lack of local resources to make them a reality. Urban renewal works as cities set up a separate urban renewal agency, and that agency collects dedicated property tax revenues from inside the specifically designated urban renewal area boundary. So if the city were to move forward with this, it would be collecting taxes from a boundary that you would designate and would only collect taxes from within that area. It's important to note that the revenues we're talking about here, often called tax increment finance revenues, or TIF, come from the division of existing property tax levies rather than increasing property tax rates. So what that means is that this tool has no impact on property tax payers. Nobody's property tax bills will increase as a result of using urban renewal, but there is no free money out there. Somebody has to bear that burden, and that is the overlapping taxing districts. So inside of an urban renewal area, as property taxes increase on those properties over time, the overlapping taxing districts forego that increase in revenue, and it instead goes to fund the projects that are specifically identified within that area. The last bullet point on this slide shows that the tool can only be used in blighted areas. That is a term defined in statute. Frankly, it's a very broad term in terms of the statutory definition, but the intent is that this tool is meant to be used in areas that are struggling to achieve new development, areas that have been vacant or underdeveloped for a long time, and areas that the city does not expect will be able to achieve their full potential without this sort of public intervention. A few other key points on urban renewal in the state of Oregon. This tool is limited by a term called maximum indebtedness that essentially is establishing at the time a new plan is adopted the total cost of all the projects that the plan is going to be able to fund over its lifetime. And whenever the urban renewal area has funded that total dollar amount, it can no longer invest in any new projects. It can only collect the tax revenues for as long as is needed to pay off that debt and then close down the tax increment program. Some communities do choose to include a duration provision as well, just to provide additional certainty on how long the urban renewal program will exist. But those duration provisions are usually measured in decades, not years, because this tool is one that starts off slow and then builds its financial capacity over time. When you're considering establishing a new urban renewal area, there are limits on how large that area can be, though the limits are fairly large. For depending on the size of population, you can have up to 25% or up to 15% of the city's assessed value and the city's acreage located inside of an urban renewal area. For Albany, it's the 15% limit that matters. And so that means for your acreage, it has to be below 1,750 acres and below $631 million of assessed value. The next three slides will show the different boundaries that we evaluated for this project. All three of them are fairly close to that cap on acreage, but they're all well below that cap on assessed value. And that's fairly typical for urban renewal areas across the state because you are looking for those blighted areas. And that means you're looking at generally large areas of vacant or undeveloped land. So a lot of acreage without a lot of value on it. And that's certainly what we see here. And all of the numbers that we're looking at assume that the existing urban renewal area would already be closed down before the city considers establishing a new one. The city's existing urban renewal area already takes up a chunk of acreage and assessed value, and so it would be challenging to establish any significant new urban renewal area while the existing one is still active. This is the first of the boundaries that we looked at, referred to as the south boundary. I'm actually going to defer to Sophie to explain sort of the rationale between why these properties were selected. And Sophie, just let me know when you want me to click through to the next boundary here on the next couple of slides.
Sure. What we kind of opted to do here, like I mentioned earlier, was look at hypothetical areas that aligned with the goals in the strategic plan, which were to stimulate business and growth development in East and South Albany's. And so, like I said, we targeted un- or underdeveloped commercial and industrial properties in both of those locations. So, Nick, this explanation will apply to both the South and the East Albany boundary, as well as the combined value. So there's infrastructure needs in these areas that have not been met, that have been proven to be barriers to recruiting job creators to these areas. And we've seen a lack of development in industrial and commercial properties there. So that's the rationale behind these two boundaries and the combined.
Yeah, and notably, the combined boundary is not taking the full amount of both and putting them together because that would be too much acreage. And so it's the core components of both the east and south. How much could you retain from each of those original boundaries while still complying with the acreage limits? This is the first of several slides on the results of our analysis. Please keep in mind that this analysis is entirely financial. This is a financial feasibility study. That does not mean that these numbers are the only thing that matters. If the city does want to consider a potential new urban renewal area in the future, certainly there are other important issues, political issues, land use planning issues, economic development issues that you'll want to pay attention to. But tonight we are just looking at the numbers to see would it potentially be even worth it? How much potential revenue could be generated from the boundaries that we're looking at? This slide is only for the combined boundary. We didn't show ones for the other two because frankly, the graph would look exactly the same. It would just be the numbers on the y-axis that would be changing. And we go into those numbers in detail on tables on the following slides here. But what's helpful when looking at this slide is seeing the illustration between the frozen base value and the increment value over time. So the value of properties that are in the area today are known as the frozen base. That's shown on the bottom in dark blue. And the revenues that are generated from that frozen base would continue to go to all the overlapping taxing districts long term. So it's about, in this combined boundary, it's generating about $3 million of property tax revenues today. And that $3 million would keep going to all of the overlapping districts, the city, the county, the school districts, et cetera. Over time, as the assessed value in the area increases, then property taxes also increase, and that increase in value is known as the increment. That's shown in light blue on this chart, and the revenue in light blue would go to the urban renewal area. We modeled two different growth scenarios here. So the upper line represents average annual growth of 5% per year in assessed value, and the dashed white line represents 4% growth per year. Both of those numbers are really consistent with long-term trends in assessed value growth, citywide and countywide. And frankly, a lot of communities across the state are in a similar area in terms of their long-term growth rates. A lot of that is because Oregon's property tax system, there's a clear distinction in Oregon between your real market value of your property, which can fluctuate wildly from year to year, and your assessed value, which can only increase by 3% per year. Because of that, most properties have assessed values that are well below their real market values. And no matter what happens with their real market value on an annual basis, they just experience that 3% growth per year on their assessed value. In order to get above that 3% growth line, you need to have exceptions to the 3% limit, and that's primarily new construction. And so that new construction we're assuming here would be adding an extra 1 to 2% growth to the assessed value in these boundaries each year. You can see the gold line on the year 2056 on this particular forecast, showing a hypothetical date for when the area might close down. And once the area does close down, then all of the overlapping taxing districts do start to receive the benefits of that growth in the tax base. So exactly how much revenue are we looking at? This is the first of 3 slides on the financial capacity for the 3 different boundaries that we looked at. We've got the 2 columns there for the 4% growth and 5% growth scenario, showing sort of a lower and higher end projection. And there are a few different ways to look at how much financial capacity the area might have. The first row on this chart is simply showing how much new construction activity would need to occur within this boundary on an annual basis in order to achieve the growth rates that we forecast here. So in this south boundary, you need to see on average $3.5 million of new construction a year to achieve that 4% growth rate. And if you wanted to achieve the 5% growth rate, you need to see on average $8 million per year. In reality, those numbers wind up being much lumpier, where you'd have a $20 million building that goes in 1 year, and then maybe no construction for several years, but averaging out to the values that we're showing here. The next row says net TIF revenue. That's the total amount of tax revenue that we anticipate this urban renewal area would receive over a 30-year period. And you can see we're forecasting it would receive between $63 million and $90 million of revenue over that time frame. So pretty significant amounts of revenue. That, however, is not the number that we tend to focus on, because urban renewal areas usually work by incurring debt. You issue debt early on in the life of the district that allows you to fund more projects in those early years when the revenue stream is fairly humble, but now you're paying interest on that debt long term. So some of those dollars you're receiving aren't paying directly for capital costs, they're now paying for interest on that debt. And when we account for that, we get to the third line on this chart, labeled maximum indebtedness. So that's the total amount that we think you could fund for capital costs in this area, and that ranges from $54 million to $77 million. We then take it one step further for the bolded line beneath that, and we say, well, a lot of those project costs are going to be funded years or decades into the future, and $1 million 20 years from now doesn't have the same purchasing power as $1 million today. We need to account for inflation that will occur. So when we account for inflation, that gets us to that bold line, the capacity in 2024 dollars. And that's where we're estimating this area would have the capacity to fund $30 to $42 million of capital projects in today's dollars. And that's really the most important measure of capacity that we have tonight. The remaining rows on this chart show the estimates of the timing of when that capacity would be available. And as we've been saying throughout this, capacity starts off slow in those early years, just a couple of $1 million in the first 5 years, but then you access more and more of that capacity as time goes on. So this is the same chart for the east boundary. We will go through it much more quickly. The east boundary is a larger boundary. It has a larger amount of assessed value in it. That means that if it were to achieve 4 or 5% growth, it would need to have more construction activity taking place here, between $7 and $16 million of new construction activity per year. But if it did achieve that trend line of 4 to 5% growth, you'd be looking at capacity to fund projects here from almost $60 million to up to $84 million. So potentially significant amounts of capacity in this area. And then the combined boundary winds up having an assessed value today that's very similar to the first boundary we discussed. And so we're looking at these potential capacity amounts here in the $39 to $55 million range. Obviously, what really drives the potential growth in any of these areas is the amount of new construction activity. And that's a crystal ball exercise. Nobody knows how much construction activity is going to take place in an area like this over the next 30 years. But again, these are trend lines, 4 and 5% growth, that are consistent with local and statewide trends in assessed value growth for areas that are achieving new construction activity. And we're looking at tens of millions of dollars of potential capacity to fund projects in these areas. For folks that may be more visual learners rather than staring at 100 different numbers on a table like we had on the last 3 slides, this is showing the same numbers as that last slide, but in a graphical format. So the light blue shaded area is showing the annual TIF revenues over time in nominal dollars. Those are the future dollars. We haven't tried to adjust them for declining purchasing power. So you can see they start off very small, almost no revenue in the early years, but they grow substantially over time. And 30 years down the road, we forecasted it could be generating $10 million per year on an annual basis. Again, 10 million 30 years from now does not buy you the same amount today. So then we look at the dark blue bars on this chart, and that's showing our estimate for the amount that you could actually spend on capital projects each year when adjusting for inflation and adjusting for the interest you have to pay on debt. And so you can see there are a handful of years where those bars shoot well above the annual cash flow you're bringing in. And that's happening when you're taking on new debt. You're borrowing money that allows you to spend more those years and accelerate the timing of developing projects. But now that you've done that, you've committed your future revenues to pay that debt service. So in all the interim years you see after that, those blue bars are below your annual cash flow because you've committed some of that cash flow to paying the debt service. And this is a very typical pattern that you'd see for other urban renewal areas, periodically being able to invest in large projects and then much smaller expenditures on an average year as a lot of your revenue goes to pay off that debt service. So if we're looking at between $30 and $80 million of potential capacity, if the city ever chose to move forward with a new urban renewal area, what could you spend those dollars on? That's all established in ORS 457. So there's a lot of details in there in the statutes, but fundamentally you can fund capital projects. You cannot fund maintenance or operations. So you could build a new road, but you can't pay for transportation to go out and have street sweepers on that road or to maintain it in future years. Pay for a new park, but you can't pay for programming and staffing of that park once it's up and running. Overall, the types of capital projects that are allowed generally focus on economic development or rehabilitation or conservation of existing buildings and housing stock. This includes any type of infrastructure facility. So we often see a lot of these funds spent on streets, pipes, parks, those kinds of projects. Public buildings can be funded, but there are restrictions on doing that now. So in the past, we saw a lot of communities use this tool to fund maybe libraries or a new city hall or a new fire station. Those all require approval from the overlapping taxing districts now, as the tool is more geared towards projects that directly lead to new private development in the areas and directly increasing the tax base. All of the projects do have to be inside of the boundary, so you can't take the money raised inside of this area and use it to fund a project that's on the other side of town. It all has to be contiguous. And the projects have to be listed in the original urban renewal plan. So when you adopt the plan, you will have a list of projects, and those are the only projects you can fund. You can amend the project list in the future, but there's public process that's involved with that. And these projects do have to conform with your adopted comprehensive plan, but that is usually not too hard of a hurdle to overcome. We mentioned at the beginning that this generates money not by increasing taxes on taxpayers, but by foregoing revenue, the growth in revenue for the overlapping taxing districts. And those are significant dollars. So what we're showing here is the amount of revenue that we estimate would be foregone from each of the potentially impacted jurisdictions over the different range of scenarios that we looked at. 3 different boundaries, 2 different growth rates for each of them. So 6 different scenarios and the range of impacts that we have here. The biggest impacts that you'll see on here are for the city, the school district, and the county. But you'll notice all of the school districts and education service districts have an asterisk next to their name. And that's because they are not directly impacted by the use of urban renewal. In fact, they're not directly impacted by any changes in their local property tax revenues. Anything that happens in the city of Albany that generates more or less tax revenue for the school district, the state has a equalization formula. So the state requires that every school district in the state receives the same amount of funding per student with various adjustments for the types of student population that they serve. And the state provides a significant chunk of funding from the state school fund to make that happen. And so particularly when an urban renewal area is created, and now some of these dollars are being foregone from the school district levy to the urban renewal area, that means that the state school fund has to contribute more to ensure that the local school district receives the same amount of funding that it's supposed to. On the flip side of that, for your existing urban renewal area that's getting ready to close down, when it closes down, all of the overlapping taxing districts will receive a boost in your local property tax revenues, but that's not going to lead to a bonanza of new funding in the classroom for the local school districts. That increase in local revenues just means that the state is going to see it and reduce the amount of state funding that they put in so that the school district winds up even keel under all of these situations, receiving the same amount that the state legislature determines. When we're looking at these large dollar amounts, one other thing I think is important to keep in mind is that the areas that we're looking at are largely vacant properties. They're blighted areas that have not achieved their full potential. They are generating very little property tax revenue today. And the most successful urban renewal areas are the ones that the city says this is not ever going to be generating significant revenue without our investment. These revenues that we're showing here, these foregone revenues, won't exist unless we invest in the area. So even though there's large numbers on the chart here, those numbers would never exist for anybody if you don't invest in the area to get that private development happening to grow that tax base. One slide here on the adoption process. If the city did decide to move forward, this is not something that happens overnight. First, you have to establish an urban renewal agency. We say done here because you already do have an urban renewal agency, and that agency may remain on the books even if the existing urban renewal plan closes down. That agency could then administer a future urban renewal area if you chose to establish one. You would then need to create an urban renewal plan and report, which has a lot of technical analysis that goes into it, describing exactly where the boundary is and what projects you'd want to fund within that boundary. Then you'd have a meeting of that urban renewal agency to discuss that plan and report, and they would choose whether or not to move forward. If they do, you would then have 45 days to meet with all of the impacted taxing districts and receive feedback from them. That would also include a planning commission meeting to review the documents. Then you'd have to go to your county, the county commission to brief them on the project, and ultimately would come back to the city council for a public hearing before you would adopt an ordinance to establish the plan. So lots of public meetings and opportunities for folks to be able to provide input. And this is not a statewide requirement, but it is a city of Albany requirement that once the city decides, yes, we would like to adopt an urban renewal area, then that has to go to a public vote, and the voters have the final say on this. So lots of public process that would happen before anything like this was implemented. My key takeaways from the analysis that we conducted here is that certainly the boundaries that we looked at with reasonable growth rate assumptions do show that there's significant financial capacity if the city chose to pursue a new urban renewal area. That capacity would, however, start small and grow over time So this would not be something that, solves all of your infrastructure funding problems tomorrow, but it could provide a very valuable tool in the decades to come. All that being said, I would say nobody should go to the bank and take these forecasts that we've done today. These forecasts are uncertain. It really depends on the future amount of construction activity that happens in these areas, and that's driven by local factors, the whims of individual property owners, and also by the global economy. So, there's going to be ups and downs, and the amount of construction that occurs here will determine how much financial capacity you actually have. When you're looking at our forecast, there's plenty of debt options that exist out there for accelerating that financial capacity, allowing you to fund projects sooner in the timeline. But anything that allows you to fund more projects sooner likely is going to come at the trade-off of taking on more risk for the city long term. And then, as I said earlier, this is only an analysis of the financial capacity. So the financial capacity certainly looks great, but if you were to move forward, you'd obviously want to better understand the political, land use, and economic considerations of establishing a new urban renewal area as well. So that's all we have for my presentation tonight. Happy to answer any questions that council has.
Council, do we have any questions for Nick? Councilor Montague?
Will we be provided a copy of the findings?
Sure, we can provide that for you.
Councilor Novak, you have something?
No.
Anybody over here? Thank you. I did have one question, Nick. So our current urban renewal district is still open until we pay all the money back. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we're going to pass that on to other councils. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next from the agenda is business from the council. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you.
I will start with Councilor McGee today.
I have a couple of things. I wanted to respond to some of the things that were brought up during business from the public. One from our HRC member, Dr. Alley. I do agree that there should be some sort of committee made to review performers or potential performers before they come in. I think that's an amazing idea, and I will have to also side with Sarah Whiteside in reference to getting more diverse voices that reflect our community, and also the statement being more accessible to people, maybe perhaps on our website, on a blurb or something that pops up that just says how you dealt with it as a mayor, because having people not being able to find it was an issue. I had a couple people ask me through email that they weren't able to access the statement, and obviously it was on the, the Democratic Herald, but having it somewhere more accessible, I think would be
I'll get with Matthew.
better. Yep, great, thank you. And then I wanted to address the young lady who talked about folks falling through the cracks. I definitely understand that. I know that it's a complex issue and that we will not be able to catch everyone, but I think we have to be sensitive and compassionate, have a lot of empathy for those who may fall through the cracks. We obviously won't be able to catch anyone, but everyone. But if we could at least have some contingency plans in reference to that would be good, I think, and it would be resourceful for us. And, excuse me, on a personal note, I have some friends coming in this weekend, and there are quite a few heavy hitters from Portland, some of my good girlfriends. One is the deputy superintendent for Portland Public Schools. Another one is a chef. Another one is the owner of Press Release Marketing. Another one is the DEI deputy officer for New Seasons Market. And another one is the VP of Engagement and Diversity for Girl Scouts of Oregon, and a host of others. So they wanted to see Albany, and so they'll be coming down spending the day on Saturday. The mayor is going to meet with them, and they're gonna get a tour of Monteith. So I'm super happy that it's open and ready. And they'll go to the AVA. I have some little bags that I've had put together for them.
Maybe the carousel?
They are coming to the carousel. I have tokens, and I asked the mayor to give me more tokens because we're gonna do some photo ops at the carousel. I'm gonna take them to Talking Waters Garden, and then we're gonna have dinner at Vault. So I'm gonna show them the best Albany has to offer, and then the next day they're going to go hiking. Emphasis on they are going to go hiking in Silver Falls. I will not be joining them. I have a speaking engagement in Eugene, and even if I didn't, I still wouldn't go. That is this weekend. Me and the mayor both have speaking engagements in Eugene this weekend. So that's all I have to say. And thank you for those who came up doing business on the public. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Counselor Kopczynski.
Yes, I heartily concur with the comments that have made about Lee Greenwood. Frankly, we just got sandbagged. We didn't know it was going to happen, and all of a sudden, whoa, what just happened? Well, by then, it's too late. So what we're trying to do is figure out how can we preclude it from happening again? And I hope we can come up with some plausible option to make that happen.
Counselor Novak, we're jumping around today.
Yeah, thank you. I see that. So just briefly, I wasn't at the 4th of July concert, and this is the first time hearing about Lee Greenwood and how things played out. I'm not going to defend what he said, but do we no longer have free speech in this country? I thought we did. I think that, you know, you might disagree with what someone says, and you can disagree with all your heart. I know I certainly have. But that doesn't mean that a person doesn't have a right to what they think. And I just want to remind you all, in the midst of all this, where tempers can flare and people take things and it's very emotional, or it can be, I just want to remind you that we have always had the right to free speech in this country. And I think that we should. And I think that when someone does make a broad, sweeping generalization, which is what to my ear it sounds like what happened, I think the appropriate thing to do is to go home to your children and say, children, this was a broad, sweeping generalization. Not everyone who is here illegally is a murderer. But I can also tell you, when I lived in San Francisco for a couple of years, back in the 1980s, there was at least one instance that came leaping to mind of someone who was here illegally and had been deported a couple of times and still came back into the country. And they did actually murder a woman while she was walking with her father on one of the piers in San Francisco. I never forgot it. So, you know, I don't want to belabor this point, but I want to just stress the idea that I believe there's an appropriate way to deal with something. Whenever you hear something or see something that you take issue with and you have your little ones and you're concerned about your little ones and what they've just been subject to, I think that an appropriate response to that is to talk to them about it and share your belief and why you feel the way you do and why you feel like this person was out of line, or that situation where people saw things, they took things in with their eyes that you didn't think were right. You know, you don't necessarily say you have no right to do this and that's hate speech because I don't like it. You just deal with it in a way that allows for people to have different perspectives. So that's what I want to say about that. And on a considerably lighter note, my sister and I were treated to an all expenses paid trip recently, which has never happened before like this quite. We were taken to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island, which is stunningly beautiful. All of them are. And while I was in Charlottetown, I was so impressed by the city and how they deal with their homeless situation that I wanted to talk to the mayor. So I went to their city hall and my sister was with me, and we met a lovely woman named Jackie McKinnon, who is, I think, there, Allison. She is the executive assistant to the mayor and council, and she was very kind to us. The mayor, this was on a Monday morning, and they were actually in a meeting, so I didn't get to meet his worship. They call him his worship. But she was very kind, and she gave us some books, and she gave both Karen and I a little pin with the coat of arms, and I have one for you. from them. So I'll give that to you afterward, but it was a beautiful trip. And if anyone ever has an opportunity, I was familiar with some of the West Coast of Canada, but never the East Coast. And if you have an opportunity to go there, I highly recommend it. I was also aboard a Coast Guard cutter that our own Peter has been on many times, and a very famous schooner called the Blue Nose. It's so well known in Canada, it's on the back of their dime. And I got to ride on it with my sister, and it was amazing. So that's my show and tell for tonight. Thank you.
Counselor Steph Newton, Azor?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few things. First, I want to quickly, since it's fresh, Councilor Novak, I just want to respond to your comment about do we not have free speech? So the First Amendment of the United States of America, the Constitution does in fact protect freedom of speech, which is the right to share ideas and opinions without government interference, punishment, or retaliation. So Lee Greenwood was paid $70,000 of taxpayer dollars and had a contract with the city for a performance of a family-friendly event. He is to be bound by that contract, and his comments were not family-friendly. They were, in fact, the opposite. So that wouldn't fall under free speech. Just wanted to clarify that.
It's his opinion, though.
For his contract, he was to provide a family-friendly event. Just because it's his opinion, you can't just say whatever you want, even if you're without freedom of repercussions. So, let's just say, for example, Peter wanted to, I don't know, say something terrible, and we would hold him accountable for that as council, correct? Even though he has a standard employment agreement, and this was a contract agreement, there's still an agreement for behaviors in which people act in accordance to when they have a contract. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to also respond to Sarah Whiteside and Allison Dean. So thank you both for your comments. I really appreciate it. You guys probably kind of read my mind. I also share your frustrations in regards to the racist, divisive and untrue comments that were made by Lee Greenwood at the 4th of July River Rhythms concert. I also feel that having a diverse community group involved in the selection or final sign-off of the musical acts at River Rhythms and Summer Sounds, that is a fantastic idea. Initially, so I didn't know you guys were coming before here, but I was planning on recommending that the Human Relations Commission, as a part of their duties, be involved in this way. And the reason why I thought this is it would be an easy thing to do is Director Kim Ledane, who is the director of the Albany Parks and Recreation, is also the staff liaison for the HRC. So I thought it would be an easy thing. I'm not sure if that would be something that Director Ledane can head up, or if that's something the HRC can, ask to be added to their duties. But I think that sounds like a fantastic idea. Then I wanted to respond to Taj, who's not here right now.
Raj?
Taj, T-A-J?
R, I think it was R.
Oh, in the email that we got sent. It's
Raj?
Raj, I apologize. So HB 4121 is a new piece of legislation that was signed in March of this year. So Oregon has put an indefinite pause of new marijuana licenses. So I'm unsure if they already have a license to have a store. Wanted to let them know. Currently in the state of Oregon, there's about 2,800 active licenses in the state. And new licenses for marijuana businesses are tied now to future population growth. So moving forward in Oregon, you can't issue any new production or retail licenses until there's 7,500 smoking age residents for every one license. And then for processing and wholesale, which I don't believe they were planning on doing, the ratio is 12,500 to 1. And then lastly, at our meeting on Monday, after learning there were bed bugs and fleas at Marvin's Gardens, I really honestly couldn't stop thinking about it and about that, the impact of that at our community. And I understand that there have been past efforts to treat the areas that have failed, treat the area that has failed. But the city of Albany owns that parcel of land. We're responsible for it. And I cannot believe that we aren't doing everything we can, like working with local partners or, to do something to address this. This is a public health issue. The EPA has designated that bed bugs are a public health issue because they can cause a variety of negative effects on people's physical health and mental health. They can cause anxiety, depression, insomnia, other systemic reactions, which can be totally exacerbated when you're already experiencing homelessness, right? And it also does come with economic consequences in areas that are infested with bed bugs, especially as they do spread. And it also begs the question, if someone who's unhoused and has a spot at Marvin's Gardens and they end up coming in contact with bed bugs or fleas, or their items do, like every item that they own, and even if a shelter did have a spot open up, would they be admitted if they had been in contact? Or are we just really kicking people while they're down by not even treating this public health issue as seriously as it should be? And that's all that I have.
Thank you. Counselor Montague?
Okay, I have a few things. I would just like, again, to strongly condemn the hateful speech of Lee Greenwood. As Counselor Newton Azores pointed out, free speech does not mean free from consequences. Hate speech has no place here, and I much appreciate all of those who have spoken out against it. Thank you for being brave and saying that this is not okay and this is not who we are. I appreciate those who did sit before us and those who have spoken out in the community. And then on to the camping ordinance, which did not pass tonight. I just want to express a heartfelt appreciation for all the work that Officer Schindel has done. I know he has put a lot of thought. He did share with me he is spending sleepless nights trying to make sure he gets this right. I know he cares, and that's great. I just really do appreciate that. The reason I did not pass it tonight is I would like us to take one more look at the penalties and see if there's a better way for escalation, an escalation model that will help us enforce these rules, but also not unnecessarily introduce folks in or reintroduce folks into the system. So if there's something we can do there, just not a last little tweak, I think we can get there. I appreciate all the changes we've made so far, and so I think we're close. Anyway, that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you. Counselor Smith?
I mentioned at the earlier meeting in July that my opinion about Mr. Greenwood's comments, what he said was a lie. It's a proven lie, and it's not okay to spread lies when you know they're wrong. That's all I have to say about that. Councilor Newton Nazar took my suggestion I was going to make as expanding the Human Relations Commission's duties to include the suggestions for reviewing. It just seems like a natural fit to me. It's a great idea. I remain frustrated by what to do about people smoking in outdoor areas when the smoke invades other people's homes. I don't know if there's a solution for that. And I appreciate Mr. Springer coming tonight to let you know in person his frustration with what's happening in his neighborhood. If anyone has an answer for that, I'd like to hear it. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you. I want to first thank the folks that came forward regarding the Lee Greenwood matter. I was raised to not speak or make statements when you're angry. So I wrote a statement, comment to the paper, and I cleaned it up as much as I possibly could and let people know how I feel about it. But I will have work with Matthew, our PIO, to put something on the site for the city to see. Thank you for your feedback tonight, Allison and Sarah. I really do appreciate it. I've received probably 80 emails, 90 emails, and I've tried to respond to every one of them. I include Marilyn and Peter on most of them. it's been a rough week. And so I was raised also by a very wise, not raised, but mentored by a very wise man named Jace, and his Mace, excuse me, and he said, Alex, it's not the stimulus, it's the response. So your feedback's been heard and felt, and I greatly appreciate you coming forward tonight. And I'm not going to be doing anything when I'm angry, so just so you know, because that has implications as well. I did have a very interesting time at the Oregon Mayors Association Conference down in Klamath Falls at the Running Wild Resort. Our state winner, Hadley Huzevka, she received a recognition from the Mayors Association and her scholarship funds. And I turned the floor over to her, and she had a great speech, and she said, when I get out of college, I'm coming to get you, Mayor Johnson. And the place just erupted in laughter. But that young lady did a great job in representing the city of Albany, and the program has grown, and the kids are interested, and it gives these young folks an opportunity to learn about local government. I think that program is fantastic, and I wish it could be bigger. And then Independence is they set their concert series for Friday nights. So I've asked Mayor McCardle to share his concert information with us, and I'm going to share our information with him so we can get some cross-pollination, and we can have them come visit with us and spend their money and vice versa. I really respect him a great deal. Olympic athlete, retired. He's in charge of a lot of Olympic things, but he's also, this is his last year as mayor. He's not going to run for re-election, and that's a big loss for the city of Independence, with great respect for him. LOC legislative agenda, Peter sent out something today. I'm sorry about stealing your thunder. We did talk about that, but you'll expound, I'm sure, in your time. But we did receive a list of case law at the LOC Mayor's Conference, or Mayor's Conference, that is before state and federal government, and I've asked the city attorney to put together some education for us, and I'm hoping a chance to have some public available for that to participate in those discussions, or at least understand what's going on with case law. There's some things that scared me, social media particularly, but I'm looking forward to what he comes up with. And then, the Amazon up in Portland has invited me up to speak with a bunch of young leaders to talk about city leadership and city government, and I'm excited about that. I'll have a date, but a good friend of mine, Washington Oyo, a Sudanese gentleman I met when I was at HP. He and I have become great friends over the years, and so he's invited me up to speak up in Portland. And with that, I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to add to what Councilor Newton Azor mentioned about marijuana shops and the future of them being tied to population growth. In addition, locally, they're not allowed within 300 feet of a residential area. So, secondly, Parks and Kim Ledane are working on a code of conduct for inclusion in future contracts. It's not something that will be entirely enforceable, but it'll certainly convey the city's priorities and their values. And then just to point out one correction of fact, River Rhythms are not paid for with taxpayers' money. They're largely from donations from corporations and a very small amount by taxpayers' money. And the last thing I had was the Stolen Thunder, and you've already mentioned that. So that's the League of Oregon Cities priorities, legislative priorities. I hope you all understand that rating mechanism, 15 points to be distributed amongst your 5 top priorities. That way, you can indicate which one is most important to you, and you can spread your weight around as you see fit. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I do have one question regarding your deputy. Is she going to be meeting with us just to say hi?
She'll be here on Monday and starting work, and of course, she'll be here on the 5th of August to introduce herself. And she'll join me on Thursday morning to meet with you. Okay. And the next time I call each of you to have a chance to meet with you, I'd like to perhaps bring her along. Okay?
Thank you very much, Peter. With that, our next meeting is going to be August 5th, 2024 at 4 p.m. for a work session, and Wednesday, August 7th for a 2024, 6 p.m. for a city council meeting. And that's our last council meeting for 6 weeks. So be here and enjoy it, and I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.